I'm Grace, a 52-year-old office worker. My husband, Thomas, has been bedridden for 7 years following a car accident. He's left paralyzed from the waist down and can't move without a wheelchair. He was in his car for work, waiting at a red light, when he was rear-ended by someone who it seems dozed off while also on the job. When I received the call from Thomas's office, I rushed to the hospital. Thomas was conscious and spoke to me, but he said he couldn't feel his legs. At that time, I never imagined he would end up bedridden. When the doctor explained the situation to me, it was the first time I felt the severity of it. He mentioned there might be lasting damage. After discharge to the lower half of Thomas's body, Thomas's life after being discharged about 2 months later completely changed. The bathroom was the most challenging part since he couldn't walk freely. Even sitting on the commode we had in the room was a struggle. However, my easygoing husband, though distressed by his physical limitations, seemed to relish the fact that he didn't have to work anymore. All the expenses were covered by the insurance of the company of the person who hit him. He was also approved for workers' comp, and disability benefits were paid out. We used that Thomas's room remodel money to remodel Thomas's room. The funds were helpful for installing things like the commode and grab bars. Now that I'm getting disability benefits, I can take things easy. Our 20-year-old college-going son, seeing his dad talk so carelessly, responded, "Dad, did you intentionally get hit or something?" An understandably angry Thomas retorted, "Why would you say something like that? Do you think I wanted to be like this?" While bedridden, Thomas's upper body moves just fine, and he speaks up whenever he wants. Thomas's life changed drastically, but it also added a lot to my plate. While Thomas never really did household chores even before, bathing him became quite a task since he can't bathe by himself. While I'm at work, he watches TV or watches videos on his smartphone lying in bed. For lunch, he heats the packed lunch I prepare for him in bed. He goes to physical therapy once a week, and I accompany him to and fro. Thomas hates the therapy and often acts like a child, making excuses not to go. "I'm not feeling well today. Maybe I should skip the hospital if you're not feeling good." "Shouldn't you go to the hospital and get checked out? You can do therapy while you're there." With no counter, he reluctantly goes. Upon returning, he often complains about the therapist for a while. There's no need for him to be so strict with me. I feel like he enjoys torturing me. Though the therapy did help and Thomas began to feel some strength in his legs, he was convinced it was his feeling normal doing after living like this for 7 years. It began to feel normal. The doctor says that with continued therapy and muscle building, he could eventually walk, but Thomas doesn't seem too happy about this progress. "I'm fine as I am. I don't think I'll get any better." I thought he said this because he didn't want to push himself in therapy. Then one day, my sister shared something curious over the phone. My sister, who delivers lunches, mentioned seeing someone who looked just like Thomas at one of her delivery locations. This man resembling my husband was limping, but his face looked identical. I chuckled and said, "Maybe you saw a look-alike. There are plenty of older men who look like Thomas out there." But my sister was unconvinced and added, "Thomas has that unique buzz cut style, right? Not many have that." After his accident, Thomas had shaved his head, and now it had grown into a sort of buzz cut style. It seemed unlikely she'd mistake someone else for him, given my sister often sees Thomas when delivering lunch on days I'm too busy. Growing slightly anxious, my sister offered, "I have a pet monitoring camera at home. How about I install it for you?" It appears my sister is suggesting setting up a hidden camera for me. I didn't think it was necessary to go that far, but since my sister strongly recommended it, I decided to ask for her help. Actually, I had some suspicions about my husband Thomas. Despite Thomas being unable to go out on his own, I found his shoes left out by the front door. I usually put them away in the shoe cabinet when he comes home, so it's unusual for them to be out. Furthermore, my husband, who usually lounges around at home in sweatpants, told me he wanted some fashionable clothes. If I aim to recover enough to wear fashionable clothes and go out, it'll motivate me to work hard in therapy, he'd said. I agreed with Thomas and bought him the clothes, but sometimes I found them thrown on the floor as if he had tried them on. Thomas usually couldn't change clothes on his own, so I helped him. After hearing my sister's story, I started to think that maybe he was changing into these clothes and sneaking out on the days Thomas went for therapy. I asked my sister to install a hidden camera. Sister had a spare key to her house since she sometimes brings lunch over for Thomas, so setting up the camera was easy. I could watch the footage in real time on my smartphone and even record it. While a part of me wanted to trust Thomas, I also needed to know the truth given the suspicious circumstances. I soon found out the truth. I casually checked my smartphone 2 days after Sister installed the camera to see what Thomas was up to while I was at work. To my surprise, Thomas was standing up by himself and changing his clothes. Although he walked with a limp, he seemed somewhat elated as he tossed aside his sweats and changed into his new fashionable outfit. After getting dressed, he checked himself out in the mirror, adjusted his buzz-cut hair, and left the room. Seeing Thomas like this shocked me, and I couldn't focus on my work that day. After all the effort and care I provided daily since Thomas's accident, I couldn't bear the thought of him sneaking around behind my back. During my lunch break, I called Sister and told her what I saw. "Sister, you were right. Thomas has been sneaking out. He even hid from me the fact that he can now dress himself." Distraught, Sister comforted me. Considering she had seen him at some woman's house, I was filled with anger and humiliation. Since Thomas's accident, I had spent almost all my time taking care of him, sacrificing my own needs. Sister, sensing my emotions, spoke gently on the other end of the line. "We should sit down and talk about this soon. We need to give Thomas a piece of our mind." Her words helped me regain some composure. Before ending the call, she emphasized, "Don't confront Thomas yet. Let him think he's getting away with it for now." Had she not advised me, I might have confronted Thomas as soon as I got home that evening. When I returned home, Thomas was nonchalantly lying on the bed, watching TV. Remembering him dressing up and leaving made my blood boil, but I kept my cool and acted as usual, unaware of the secret filming. Thomas continued his secret outings in style. In the meantime, Sister did some snooping during her breaks and sent me pictures of him entering a young woman's house several times. About a month after setting up the hidden camera, Sister and I met to strategize on confronting Thomas. I told her I had work, so we had until the evening for our planning session. While discussing with Sister and checking Thomas's current actions on my smartphone, he began changing clothes right in front of us. Seeing that he was getting ready to head out again and nervously sitting on the bed, Sister remarked, "I wonder if he's invited his mistress over to our place today." I thought even Thomas wouldn't go that far. But considering his physical limitations, it might be more convenient for him. After a while, we heard the doorbell ring, and Thomas got up and walked towards it, not even using a cane. Sister's prediction seemed about to come true, and my heart raced. The next moment, a young woman entered Thomas's room. The instant Sister saw her, she exclaimed, "That's her. The one I saw with Thomas." Sister and I immediately left the cafe and rushed to my house. Seeing Thomas and his mistress together in real time was both helpful yet startling. When Sister and I checked my phone once more just outside our house, we were met with a shocking sight. Thomas and the woman were embracing each other. Watching Thomas, who supposedly was paralyzed from the waist down, in such a passionate embrace was unbelievable. Sister and I stormed into the house, heading straight for Thomas's room. When my sister and I walked into the room, my husband Thomas and his mistress were still locked in an embrace. From shock, but they quickly pulled apart. In his flustered state, Thomas said to me, "Oh, you're back early." The young mistress tried to flee the room, but my sister blocked her path. "We'd like to have a word with you. Please stay," I confronted my standing husband. "So, your leg's been fine all along. You really had me fooled." As I said this, Thomas melodramatically grabbed his leg and collapsed onto the bed. "No, you've got it all wrong. She's a masseuse. She was helping me with my leg pain." I did get a massage, and it feels better, but it still hurts. The mistress nodded in agreement to Thomas's explanation. My astounded sister pointed at a hidden camera and scolded Thomas. Everything was caught on that camera. It sure didn't look like a massage to me. Realizing the existence of the camera, Thomas became defensive. Planting a hidden camera? That's an invasion of privacy. You can't use that as evidence. My sister, showing a great deal more vigor than one would expect from someone who's supposedly bedridden, yelled at Thomas while showing him several photos. The pictures clearly showed Thomas entering a suburban house with a mistress. Another picture captured Thomas without any cane, walking by himself. After getting out of a taxi, Thomas was silent, evidently unable to refute the evidence in the photographs. "When were you able to walk again?" the mistress answered in place of the silent Thomas. "About a year ago." Thomas called me, saying he was feeling better and asked if we could see each other again. I was taken aback by the phrase "see each other again" and asked the mistress, "Wait, have you and my husband been seeing each other before?" She resignedly told us everything. She was Thomas's colleague, and they had been involved about 10 years ago, but their relationship ended due to an accident 7 years ago. However, with Thomas's improved leg condition, he insisted on rekindling their relationship. From Thomas's point of view, he would still receive his disability benefits, and now with his mobility back, probably wanted some fun. As for the mistress, she had a history with him, so they were comfortable with each other, a win-win situation for both. Realizing that Thomas had not only lied about his leg, but had also been cheating for over 10 years was a lot to take in. The thought of all the sacrifices I had made for such a man made me want to laugh out of sheer disbelief. Seeing my speechless reaction, my sister shouted at Thomas, "Thomas, you are the lowest of the low. Do you have any idea how hard it's been for Catherine since your accident?" Thomas was speechless and looked paralyzed on the bed. The mistress, thinking she had no role in this anymore, remarked, "I'm going to leave. I won't see this man again. So don't worry. He always complained about this and that, and it was too much for me." As the mistress tried to leave, I grabbed her hand and said, "Since I don't need this man anymore, could you take him with you? Of course, I'll be expecting compensation from you as well." Seeing my serious expression, she hurriedly left the house. Thomas, left behind, seemed to realize the gravity of the situation and pleaded, "I'm sorry, please don't abandon me." My sister scoffed and said, "You're all healed now. You can live on your own, right?" Holding back tears, I added, "Of course, we'll be getting a divorce, and I'll expect compensation from you." In a panic, Thomas jumped out of bed and repeatedly bowed down in apology. Each time, his leg, which was supposed to be immobile, folded perfectly as he bowed down. Clearly, his leg had been fine for a long time. Later on, I moved out and started living in an apartment. My college-going son, Harry, had been living on his own, but when I brought up the topic of divorce, he understood. Harry occasionally took care of my husband in my stead. And it seemed he had been suspicious upon seeing his father suddenly stand up. Harry was suspicious alone. However, he never imagined that his father had been cheating on me. He was livid when he learned about the affair. In addition to the divorce, there was the issue of alimony. We got a lawyer involved, but things just got messy. Even though my husband was well, he had been collecting disability payments, which landed him in more trouble. Now, on top of the alimony I was owed, he had to repay those disability funds. Though my husband hadn't been working, he had received a significant sum from an insurance payout after an accident, so he had some assets. I was able to get my fair share of alimony and the marital assets. From what the lawyer told me, it seems he's considering going back to work. But after loafing around for 7 years, I wonder what he can really do now. He made his bed, and now he needs to lie in it. Now that I've left my husband and live alone, I'm enjoying my free time. In the past, my life revolved around my husband, leaving little time for myself. I want to make up for all those years I lost caring for him. Over those 7 years, it's also heartwarming to see Harry checking up on me from time to time. I look forward to seeing how my dependable son continues to grow.
My sister went MIA a few months ago. I was close with my sister, but we fell off over the years. She's not involved and gave up her child to my parents. My parents have custody of my niece pre-tween, and she's living with my parents, who feel as though they're getting too old. enough to the point where they can barely take care of her and attend to her needs. I have 2 children already and don't want any more children. My parents invited me over for a sit-down conversation. They explained how it was hard for them to care for my niece due to their age and suggested that I take her in. I declined as they know I have 2 children and don't plan on having more. My parents, mostly my mother, accused me of being selfish and mentioning that I live in a house with 4 bedrooms. She suggested that I should turn over one of the bedrooms to my niece. I told her that wouldn't happen, as I didn't want more children and did not want the responsibility of more kids. I suggested they should give my niece up to foster care or try looking for the girl's mother. My dad agreed to make the search for her mother the priority, and if that didn't go well, they would then consider putting the child into foster care. I offered to help with the search, but as I was leaving my parents' house, my mother asked me if I would be able to live with myself if my niece were to get put into foster care. I responded to her by saying, "Of course I would. I feel bad, but more kids come with more responsibilities, and that's not something I want in my life, and I just don't feel that adding another one into the mix is a good idea." She proceeded to call me a selfish idiot before walking away. I shrugged it off. Am I the idiot for not wanting to take in my sister's daughter? I couldn't live with myself if I allowed my nephew or niece to live in foster care. However, I find it odd that your mother's putting this on you. Even if it's getting hard on them to take care of her, can they live with sending her to foster care? You are not the idiot since it isn't your responsibility, but you're not exactly the person anyone would strive to be. This sums it up. OP isn't obligated, but, like it's kinda cold, I would give everything to protect my niece and nephew. And even if I didn't feel that way, I couldn't bear to see them disappear into the system. Lately, she's been abandoned by her mother, and now she's about to be abandoned by your parents and rejected by you. Does no one love this poor child? Extended family? Friends? Indeed, someone cares about her. This is heartbreaking. Yeah, Mom up and left. Grandparents are ready to throw in the towel, and Aunt and Uncle can't be bothered. What the heck kind of cold weather family is this? You are the idiot, OP. I understand it's hard. I have 2 kids, and I don't want more. But I agree with your parents. You are being selfish. How could you let a cousin of your children go to foster care when you can care for her? Your parents would surely help you with all 3 children to the best of their ability. It might even be a lighter load for you with that in mind. Why isn't this the girl's dad's problem? Like, why aren't they asking him? Or are they trying to find their deadbeat of a daughter first? Or do the grandparents accept that they've taken on responsibility for the kid and raised her? It's funny that you're all so ready to crap all over OP when there are so many other people who have a higher responsibility whom you exempt from that responsibility. OP's parents chose to take on that challenge, but seem to be experiencing an acute FAFO scenario due to their age. That's not OP's responsibility. From a moral standpoint, it does seem a little insensitive to condemn an innocent child to the foster system. Still, there are also 2 other people, the biological parents, responsible for this situation, and there doesn't seem to be enough onus being placed on them to get it together. I, 36 male, was a day 1 adoption. Bio parents never even saw me. My adopted parents raised their family where we were encouraged to be healthy, but not pushed to be crazy about it. For example, eat healthy and walk when you can, but don't necessarily feel pushed to do sports or go to the gym. I do exercise regularly though. Anyway, I've never really had a burning desire to find my bio family, but I received a DNA kit from a coworker as a birthday gift and figured there was no harm. They don't know I'm adopted. What I didn't expect to find was a full-blooded sister. Turns out I have 3 sisters and a brother. She reached out to me first, and after a few months of back and forth and advice from my dad, I drove out to see them over the holidays. When I drove up to the house, I thought I had the wrong address at first. The whole family, siblings, parents, grandparents, etc., were outside waiting for me. They were also all morbidly obese. I don't mean that figuratively. My bio mother's basically Darlene Cates from What's Eating Gilbert Grape, and they didn't get much smaller from there. With that said, I tried to put it out of my mind and focus on the positive of meeting my family. The visit was going okay. It felt a little forced, until dinner. A literal feast was prepared, to the extent that there were more options than I could eat. In the end, I could only manage a plate and a half. The rest of the visit went fine, and I left happy to have met them. It wasn't until I got home that I saw the missed messages. I was accused of being a fat-phobic idiot. Everything from my initial confusion when I arrived to how little I ate was scrutinized. I was told I made everyone feel judged and unwanted. I honestly don't care about people's weight, but I also don't want to pretend I wasn't put off by them at first. In my defense, I wasn't expecting them to be so heavy, but I also think I demonstrated that I wouldn't let myself judge a book by its cover. I don't know. Am I the idiot? No, not the idiot. It sounds like they're the ones with the problem. They might have been mentally surfing on the "it's genetics" thing their entire lives as a reason for being overweight. Seeing you probably brought a harsh reality crash that their issues are from lifestyle over anything else. Sometimes a reality hit like that makes people lash out and blame others, rather than take responsibility for their own actions. I'm sorry for you that they let something that petty be negative for your first meeting of the bio family. This was my first thought as well. There are a lot of people who blame poor genetics on their weight. We can blame genetics on where we put on weight, but it's mostly behavioral decisions that cause weight gain. My ex-mother-in-law would blame genetics, not the extra calories she ate while preparing meals. Being vocal about it was her preemptive defense mechanism. It's funny that she had a very outdoorsy brother and a vegetarian who was beanpole thin. I think it's normal to look confused when meeting bio family after 36 years. You literally have no clue what to expect, even if there had been social media pictures shared ahead of time. Unless you openly called them all fat, eating a plate and a half is a perfectly normal amount to eat. You shouldn't have to force yourself to eat more than what's comfortable to make them feel better about themselves. This really has nothing to do with you and everything to do with themselves. Please don't doubt yourself and do what you must to keep the peace in your life. I was diagnosed with PPD, so I'm not sure if this is playing a part in my actions or not. I've been with my boyfriend for 6 years, and he has a tween son, Jake. I've owned my home for nearly 10 years now. They moved in 2 years ago. Our daughter is an infant. Now, Jake loves his sister. He's always holding her and trying to help. But there's been a massive issue since I had her, with him purposely scaring her, walking up to her and yelling, "Rah!" He thinks it's hilarious when she does startle reflexes, and then laughs when she cries, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare her like that," but continues laughing and purposely trying to scare her, at least 4 times a day. Now, I've always told him to cut the crap. I've told him several times that he's hurting her ears. I've told him several times that it's not funny. And then, not even 3 days ago, I lost my crap entirely and told my boyfriend and him that if he purposely scared my kid again, then they would be evicted and gone from my constant life. I said this because while my boyfriend sometimes corrects his kid, he also tells me I'm overreacting. He said it's natural for kids to think it's funny when babies get startled, and I simply don't understand because I've never been around multiple kids. His son has a half-brother and apparently did the same thing with him when he was a baby. But anyway, I lost it and threatened to kick them out, and at that moment, I truly felt like an idiot because Jake looked sad and just went to his room. But like last night, I stepped out of the room for a minute and my daughter was in her swing. Jake went to sit here, and when I was out of the room, I heard Jake very loudly and fast say, "What are you doing?" in a baby voice, and my daughter started screaming immediately. I heard my boyfriend take care of it, and then like an hour later, I went to the bathroom, and the baby was in her seat, and I heard, "Rah!" followed by the baby crying, yet again. So I told them to pack their crap and get out now. I didn't wait for a response, because now I'm trying to calm down my baby. Jake tried apologizing and said it was a habit, and my boyfriend started protesting, saying it wasn't a big deal. I just refused to acknowledge their excuses and told them to leave. My boyfriend sat down on the chair, said he wasn't going anywhere, and that this was his house too. So I said I would leave then and have the cops serve him an eviction notice. He tried begging me to calm down and kept saying, "He's a tween. What do you expect? He's not going to be perfect." I left, and this morning, I filed for their eviction. Everyone thinks I'm being ridiculous here, but Jake refuses to stop, and I'm tired of him purposely yelling in my daughter's face to scare her 4 times a day. Edit. I've also asked Jake why he does this, and he said he thinks it's funny when kids cry. Not the idiot. Yes, he's a tween. He's old enough to know better and to not do it, old enough to listen to instructions. Would he like it if you startled him every morning? No, he's a tween, but he's being an idiot, and this almost sounds sadistic. The fact that he says he likes making babies cry is alarming. I'm wondering what other behavioral issues he has. Jake thinks it's funny to scare a baby and laughs when she cries. I would consider his behavior abusive, especially since he's been told numerous times to stop. Even after being threatened with eviction, he still did it. It almost seems like a power trip to him. Picking on a smaller person with the express interest of scaring them, it might be that he's jealous because he isn't getting all of the attention. Regardless, he needs help. The key detail is that Jake started to scare your baby when you left the room. It means that he's in control of his behavior. It means that he knows that you disapprove. That's not innocent child behavior. He's acting sneaky and duplicitous. Your boyfriend is a crap parent. It's pretty sad that he's taking Jake's side over a defenseless infant. Throw them out and threaten to call the cops on that little idiot if he does it again. That'll scare him. And your boyfriend can't be trusted to protect her. Seems he's barely older than his son. My kid has to sell chocolate-covered almonds as a fundraiser at school. I would rather just give them the amount he'll raise, but that isn't allowed. So I told my wife to just pay for 2 boxes out of the petty cash I keep in my office. I'll take the almonds to work and give them out to my guys for free. My wife says I'm missing the point and should take my son out to sell the almonds. I think that's ridiculous. I think I have better ways to spend several hours than to harass my neighbors trying to get them to buy chocolate. I told her she could either go out and sell the chocolate or take my money. Now she thinks I'm an idiot because I don't value her free time. She's a stay-at-home mom right now. When our youngest is 2, she'll be going back to work. I work 60 hours a week, not including the commute. Now she wants me to spend hours out selling chocolate? No thanks. My free time is valuable too. Am I the idiot for telling my wife to either take my money or she can be responsible for fundraising? Not the idiot. These fundraisers are complete BS. They combine child labor with the pressure to donate. When I was in school, we did a fundraiser run where we had to get family members to sign documents that they would give X amount per kilometer we ran. The money was supposed to go to a new hall for PE. Surprise, surprise, I'm out of school for almost 10 years now, and there were no signs of a new hall yet. It's about spending time with your kid, not making money. You have better things to do for a few hours than parent your child. Sadly, you think your free time is too valuable to spend with your kid. The almonds are an opportunity to teach your child work and reward for the first time, and you'd rather just hand over the money. Something tells me that your kid is the kind who acts terribly at restaurants, and instead of teaching manners, you use an iPad. Because parenting is hard, and you don't feel like making an effort. You are the idiot and the subpar parent. Your wife is your kid's only hope. I agree. The point is to teach your child. Fundraising sucks, but you're teaching your child life skills. Speaking confidently to strangers, accepting no gracefully, handling money, hard work, and accomplishing a goal for the greater good. None of this is about chocolate. Your wife wants you to spend time with your son. Ignore these idiots. I also work a lot, and using the little quality time I have with my son for running from door to door and bothering people would also be very low on the list of things I'd like to do. You were right. Improve your position by pledging to do something else with your kid. No one wants to flog or buy a $10 roll of gift wrap, a $15 box of chocolate-covered almonds, a $20 bucket of frozen cookie dough, etc. The school district my children attended banned these fundraisers a long time ago. I, 34 male, am engaged to my fiancée, Emily, 31 female. Both of our families are lower class, so we have to pay for the wedding by ourselves. We talked it through, and I suggested we have a more chill, smaller wedding and save our money for a down payment on a bigger house. I make significantly more than her. She's a teacher and I'm a doctor. So I told her I would take care of the majority of the expenses, like the venue, catering, and planner, if she just paid for her dress and more minor stuff like that. Last week, her parents hosted a party for us before the wedding, and her mom kept making comments about how she can't believe how small our wedding will be, or that we're not hosting it at the fancy hotel downtown that's just so much better and elegant than what I chose. I even overheard her talking to her sister about how small the diamond is in Emily's ring and that it's embarrassing a doctor won't treat her daughter better. I spent about $5,000, which I thought was fair. She just seemed so hung up on the fact that her daughter's marrying a doctor, but the wedding and the ring isn't on a doctor level. Based on what I know, I think she's a little embarrassed about her family's socioeconomic status and was hoping her daughter marrying a doctor would help her improve her image to her friends and extended family. Throughout all of it, Emily looked extremely embarrassed and awkward and kept trying to tell her mom it was fine, and her mom just said, "You need to learn to stand up for yourself." That's when I just lost it and told her mom she could be uninvited from the wedding if she had so many problems with it and was embarrassed by how cheap I was. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. This sounds incredibly exhausting and selfish. She's ruining the atmosphere of a special day for her daughter and for you. I hope this doesn't foreshadow how she'll be throughout your marriage. She sounds like a nightmare. Be sure to get a prenup OP and set clear boundaries about how much access mother-in-law gets to you, your home, your family, plus assets going forward, so you don't get to a point where mother-in-law sees what's yours is also hers, moves into your house, and stuff like that, or starts expecting you to support her financially. Also, talk to your fiancé and ensure you're on the same page regarding how to deal with her mom. Exactly. Mother-in-law is a gold digger. Get a prenuptial agreement. Don't let love blind you. She may have been pushed to find a doctor to marry. The fact is, she told her mom it's okay. She didn't say it was perfect and put her in her place. She may love you, but if she ever decides she's unhappy with doctor's hours, things will be messy. I admire your small wedding. It should be personal, not a waste of money on a big show for people who are only there for free food and drinks. Good luck.
The warm, coastal breeze of a late summer evening swept through the luxurious Hamptons villa, where Mark Sinclair found himself attending yet another business social gathering. He was used to these kinds of events, lavish affairs with influential people, perfect for networking. Tonight, however, felt different. Perhaps it was the location. The villa belonged to his longtime friend, Eric Blackwood, a suave and successful businessman. Mark had always admired Eric's charm, his ability to command attention without seeming to try. Eric was everything Mark aspired to be, or at least that's what he thought before tonight. Mark, 38 years old, was at a point in his life where he felt that everything should be falling into place. He had a successful career in marketing, rising quickly through the ranks at his Manhattan-based firm. He was respected, reliable, and focused. His wife, Sophie Sinclair, 34, was the jewel of his life, a dazzling beauty with blonde hair that framed her face like a halo. Sophie was the woman every man dreamed of marrying. At least that's what everyone said. To outsiders, they had the perfect life, a successful, handsome couple, living in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, attending charity galas, mingling with the New York elite. But behind closed doors, things were different. Mark had been pouring himself into his work for the last few years, hoping to secure a top position at his firm. This ambition left little room for personal time with Sophie. He justified it as a temporary sacrifice, something necessary to secure their future. Sophie, on the other hand, had grown restless. She wasn't built for the solitude that Mark's long hours brought. She thrived on attention, excitement, and adventure, traits that made her irresistible to others, but increasingly difficult for Mark to understand. This particular evening at Eric's villa was one of those rare occasions when Mark decided to let loose a little. The stress of his job had been weighing him down, and Sophie had insisted they attend. "You need a break, Mark. You're always working," she had said, her tone slightly clipped, as if there were more to her frustration than she let on. Sophie was right. He did need a break. So here he was, dressed in a tailored suit, drink in hand, mingling with people he only vaguely knew. Sophie, as always, was the center of attention. She floated around the party in a crimson silk gown that hugged her curves, her laughter infectious, her presence magnetic. Mark watched her from across the room, his heart swelling with a mixture of pride and guilt. She was so beautiful, so full of life, and here he was, always too preoccupied with work to truly appreciate her. He had promised himself that things would change, that he'd spend more time with her. After this promotion, everything would be different. But life doesn't wait for perfect timing. As the evening progressed, Mark found himself engrossed in a conversation with a potential business partner. It was a tedious discussion about market shares, a topic that usually captivated him. But tonight, his mind kept wandering. He caught glimpses of Sophie laughing with Eric. They were standing too close, and something about the way they exchanged glances made his stomach twist. Mark shook off the feeling. Eric was his friend, and Sophie had always been flirtatious. That's just who she was. There was no reason to feel uneasy. And yet, that nagging doubt lingered in the back of his mind, a shadow that refused to be dispelled. At some point in the evening, Mark excused himself from the conversation and decided to take a break outside. The villa's sprawling gardens were illuminated by soft lanterns, casting a romantic glow on the pathways. He wandered aimlessly, the soft murmur of the party fading into the background. He needed a moment to clear his head, to shake off the inexplicable anxiety that had settled in his chest. That's when he heard it, Sophie's voice, hushed but unmistakable, coming from a secluded corner of the garden. Mark stopped in his tracks, instinctively drawn toward the sound. He couldn't make out the words at first, but as he moved closer, the conversation became clearer. "I can't believe we've been doing this for months," Sophie was saying, her voice a mixture of excitement and guilt. "It's like living a double life." Mark's breath caught in his throat. His first instinct was to turn around and walk away, to pretend he hadn't heard anything. But something compelled him to stay, to listen. "I know," came a second voice, Eric's. His tone was smooth, almost soothing. "But we've been careful. Mark hasn't noticed a thing. He's too wrapped up in his work to even suspect." Mark's heart pounded in his chest, each beat a hammer against his rib cage. He stepped closer, careful not to make a sound. From his hidden vantage point, he could see them now, standing under the soft glow of the lanterns. Sophie was facing Eric, her hand resting on his arm, her expression conflicted. "He's a good man," Sophie said softly, her voice tinged with regret. "I never wanted to hurt him." "You're not hurting him," Eric replied, his voice low and persuasive. "You're just doing what you need to do to feel alive again. He doesn't have to know." Mark felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. His worst fears, the ones he had buried deep inside, were now confirmed in the most brutal way possible. Sophie, the woman he had devoted his life to, was having an affair with his closest friend. The shock of the betrayal left him momentarily paralyzed. He wanted to storm in, to confront them, to demand answers. But instead, he found himself rooted to the spot, listening in disbelief. as the people he trusted most spoke of their secret relationship with such casual familiarity. "I hate sneaking around like this," Sophie said, her voice wavering. "But you're right. Mark's so focused on his career. I feel like I've been invisible for years. I don't know what to do anymore." Eric stepped closer to her, his hand gently brushing her cheek. "You deserve more than being someone's afterthought, Sophie. With me, you're the center of attention, the way you should be." Mark clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms. He had never felt such an intense mix of emotions: anger, heartbreak, betrayal, and disbelief, all swirled within him, leaving him raw and exposed. He wanted to scream, to lash out, to make them see how deeply they had wounded him. But instead, he forced himself to stay silent. Bursting in on them now would only lead to a scene, one that he wasn't emotionally prepared to face. "I don't know how much longer we can keep this up," Sophie said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's exhausting, lying to Mark all the time. I hate myself for it." Eric wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "You don't have to make any decisions right now. We'll figure it out. But remember, Sophie, you deserve to be happy. That's all that matters." Mark felt like he was going to be sick. The betrayal cut deeper than anything he had ever experienced. It wasn't just the affair, it was the way they spoke about him, as if he were some distant figure in their lives, someone to be pitied rather than respected. The realization that his marriage had been a facade, that Sophie had been leading a double life for months, left him shattered. But as much as he wanted to confront them, to demand answers, he knew this wasn't the time. Not here, not now. The party was still in full swing, and creating a scene would only make things worse. He needed time to process, to think, to figure out what to do next. Mark quietly retreated, slipping back into the shadows of the garden, his mind racing. He had always prided himself on being level-headed, on not letting emotions get the better of him. But tonight, that self-control was slipping away, replaced by a searing rage and overwhelming grief. He made his way back into the villa, the noise of the party, a distant hum in his ears. People smiled at him as he passed, oblivious to the turmoil raging inside him. He forced a polite nod, his face a mask of calm, but inside, he was crumbling. Sophie and Eric rejoined the party, not long after, both of them laughing and chatting, as if nothing had happened. Mark watched them from across the room, his stomach churning. How could they be so brazen? How could they lie to his face, all the while knowing what they had been doing behind his back? For the rest of the evening, Mark went through the motions, engaging in small talk with other guests, all the while keeping a close eye on Sophie and Eric. His mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? How many lies had Sophie told him? And most importantly, what was he going to do about it? By the time the party wound down, Mark had made a decision. He wasn't going to confront Sophie tonight. He needed time to gather his thoughts, to figure out his next move. The revelation of the affair had shattered his world, but he wasn't going to let it destroy him. The morning after the party, Mark woke early, unable to sleep. He sat in the kitchen of their penthouse, a cup of coffee in front of him, but untouched. The events of the previous night replayed in his mind over and over again, each repetition cutting deeper. Sophie entered the kitchen a little while later, her hair tousled, her face glowing from the night before. She smiled at him, a casual, loving gesture that made Mark's stomach twist in knots. How could she act so normal, so innocent, after everything that had happened? "Good morning," she said, leaning in to kiss him on the cheek. He flinched slightly, unable to mask the pain that flashed across his face. She paused, noticing his tense expression. "Mark, is everything okay?" Mark set down his coffee cup, his hands trembling slightly. This was it. The moment he had dreaded and anticipated in equal measure. He had thought about waiting, about confronting her later when he was calmer, but the words were already on the tip of his tongue, begging to be released. "I heard you last night," he said quietly, his voice tight with emotion. Sophie frowned, confusion flickering across her face. What do you mean? In the garden, Mark continued, his gaze fixed on her. I heard everything, Sophie. You and Eric. Sophie's face drained of color, her eyes widening in shock. For a moment, she was speechless, her mouth opening and closing, as if she couldn't quite process what he had just said. Mark, she began. But he cut her off, his voice rising with anger. Don't, he snapped. Don't lie to me anymore. I heard everything. How long has this been going on? Sophie looked away, guilt and shame written all over her face. She didn't answer, but her silence was all the confirmation Mark needed. He stood up from the table, his hands clenched into fists. How could you do this to me, Sophie, to us? I've spent years working to build a life for us, to give you everything you could ever want, and this is how you repay me. Tears welled up in Sophie's eyes, but Mark didn't care. His own pain was too overwhelming to feel any sympathy for her in that moment. I didn't want this to happen, she whispered, her voice trembling. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, Mark said, his voice cold. You made a choice, Sophie. You chose to betray me, and I can't. He paused, his throat tight with emotion. He couldn't finish the sentence. He couldn't bring himself to say the words that would end their marriage, even though he knew that was where this was heading. Sophie took a step toward him, her eyes pleading. Please, Mark, I'm sorry. I made a mistake, but I still love you. Can't we fix this? Can't we try to make things right? Mark stared at her, his heart torn in two. A part of him wanted to believe her, to forgive her, to try to rebuild what they had lost. But the other part of him, the part that had heard her confess her love for another man, knew that some things were too broken to be repaired. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, he said quietly, his voice hollow. And without trust, there's nothing left. Sophie's tears spilled over, and she covered her face with her hands, sobbing. But Mark felt no comfort in her remorse. The damage had been done, and there was no going back. Mark left the apartment that day, taking only what he needed. He didn't look back. The betrayal had cut too deep. And staying in that penthouse, with all its memories, was unbearable. As he walked through the streets of New York, the city bustling with life around him, Mark F. felt a strange sense of liberation. The pain of Sophie's betrayal would take time to heal, but he knew that he couldn't let it define him. He had lost something precious, but he had also gained clarity. Trust was fragile, easily shattered, but impossible to rebuild once broken. And now, Mark was free to rebuild his life on his own terms. Life is unpredictable, filled with moments that challenge us in ways we never imagined. For Mark, the revelation of Sophie's affair shattered the illusion of a perfect life, but it also gave him the strength to move forward. Sometimes, the hardest moments in life lead to the most profound personal growth. Thank you for watching. If you've been moved by this story, or have your own thoughts about relationships and trust, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt stories like this. What would you do if you were in Mark's shoes? Would you confront the betrayal or walk away? Let us know your thoughts, and we'll see you in the next story.
During my college years, I had a significant experience with my aunt by marriage, which I've never shared with anyone before. I'm taking this opportunity to share it online. I was born in a rural area and managed to get into a high school that was known for being attended only by top students. All of my friends were focused solely on their studies, and although I longed to have fun, my curiosity and dedication to my studies eventually led me to be admitted to one of the top universities in the country. I studied at a boarding high school in the countryside. Both sets of my grandparents were quite wealthy, which thankfully allowed me to attend a private high school and have my boarding fees covered. My parents run a stable business. However, my mother had complications during her pregnancy with me, leading to a premature birth, which made them hesitant to have a second child. I spent quite some time in an incubator as a premature baby, overcoming many challenges as I grew. Consequently, my parents' primary concern was always my growth and health. As a child, I was prone to catching colds and suffered from chickenpox and skin diseases due to my weak immune system. My parents left no stone unturned in ensuring my health, seeking out the best medical treatments, natural healing methods, and gentle products for me to use. Fortunately, as I grew older, my health improved significantly. Living away from my parents in the boarding school raised their concerns for my well-being, but over time, my immune system strengthened, and I became healthier than many of my peers. I have an aunt and an uncle on my mother's side. My aunt and uncle always gave me pocket money whenever they saw me, admiring how I grew up strong and smart, despite being born weak, and showered me with affection. As the eldest child in my father's family, I was the first to receive love and attention from all my relatives. Before starting university, I tried my hand at part-time jobs, and I was quite popular among the customers, much to my embarrassment. Now, let me tell you about my uncle, my mother's youngest brother. He is 10 years younger than my mother, who used to carry him on her back and take care of him. Growing up with 2 older sisters, my uncle has a very kind personality. He is currently a teacher and has recently married a fellow teacher, my aunt. When my uncle got married, my grandfather bought them a nice apartment in the city. He also told my uncle that if he ever found the teaching life too challenging, he could always learn about running the family business. The college I attended was conveniently close to my uncle's place. My mom, feeling uneasy about me living on my own as I began my college life, reached out to my uncle. She proposed, "We'll provide ample living expenses. So could he possibly stay with you for a year?" My aunt, overhearing this, immediately agreed, saying, "Of course, he should stay with us." That's how I ended up living with my uncle's family during my freshman year. My aunt would often come home a bit earlier than most, and seemed perpetually busy coordinating with other parents. Surprisingly, without me even mentioning it, there was a lineup of students wanting tutoring. My uncle suggested, "Since we're newlyweds with no one to bother us, why don't you take as many students as you can manage and teach them here?" He even bought a large table for our living room for this purpose. My days were filled with attending classes and tutoring from evening till night. While it left me a little short on personal study time, I was genuinely happy. My aunt also made sure to prepare snacks for the students I was tutoring. Earning a good amount from tutoring made me incredibly happy. One day, I suggested treating my uncle and aunt to dinner and buying them each an outfit. My uncle joked, "If my nephew is offering, I've got to accept happily." When I bought my aunt a dress and saw her trying it on, my heart unexpectedly started racing. I didn't show it, but from that moment, I began to see my aunt in a different light. As the semester ended and summer break began, my uncle had to go on a business trip. Since my aunt had done so the previous year, she stayed home. My parents wanted me to come home, saying they missed me, but I decided to stay for my tutoring commitments and planned to visit during the holiday season. My aunt, who usually didn't have the time, decided to try her hand at cooking more and went grocery shopping. We ended up having dinner together earlier than usual that day. My aunt loves seafood, which my uncle isn't fond of, so she bought a lot of clams and shrimp to make seafood pasta. When I asked if I could help, she cheerfully responded, "No need, just enjoy what I cook." My aunt is a remarkably diligent person, never one to sit still. If something catches her eye, she has to clean it up immediately, which is why the house is always spotless. The seafood pasta my aunt by marriage made that day was absolutely delicious. She pulled out a bottle of wine she had received as a gift and suggested we drink it together, and the atmosphere gradually became more cozy and warm. When asked if she missed my uncle since they were newlyweds, she waved the question away, saying that after dating for so long, she didn't really feel his absence. "Auntie, do you plan on having kids anytime soon?" I know it might be rude to ask, but I think a child of yours would be beautiful, I inquired. My aunt's face momentarily clouded over. "Yes, we're newlyweds, but it seems your uncle isn't quite ready yet. Pressuring him hurts his pride, and we're both so exhausted all the time. There's hardly a moment to think about starting a family," she replied. Seeing her usually bright and beautiful expression changed so drastically really broke my heart. Given the difficult conversation, I found some courage too. It was a first for me, but I ended up spending the whole night with her until my uncle returned from his training. We spent every night together in her room, just like a couple. The day my uncle came back, the three of us went out for dinner, and my aunt seemed a bit awkward around him. I couldn't help but find the situation somewhat endearing, and chuckled to myself. My aunt, always seeking my company, seemed so lovely to me, which felt like trouble. However, the thought of stepping back, considering they might start a family and have a cute niece or nephew, seemed like the right thing to do. That's the correct decision, isn't it? Thank you for reading my story.
My name is Daisy Parker. I'm 40 years old, and I have no children from my second marriage. My husband is a thoughtful man who never skips our monthly dates, no matter how hectic his schedule gets. He always keeps his promises. I know I shouldn't compare him to my first husband, but I have never regretted my divorce, nor have I regretted getting remarried. This month is our 8th wedding anniversary. My husband had reserved a table at a fancy restaurant with a view of the sea. I thought we were going to have a wonderful time, but then I ran into the last person I wanted to see. It was Leo Thomas, my ex-husband from 10 years ago. We were about to leave the restaurant after finishing our meal when my husband excused himself to go to the restroom. I was admiring the ocean view from the window. What a beautiful view! As I gazed at the sea, I reminisced about the times my husband and I had spent looking at the ocean together. Just then, I heard someone call my name. When I turned around, there he was. "Hey, what's so beautiful? Do you think a regular ocean appears nice to someone like you, who's pretty much broke?" Leo sneered. "Leo, hey, long time no see. Why are you?" I stammered. "Why? I'm the one who should be asking you why," Leo replied, sitting down in the chair my husband had been using, looking at me as if I was a joke. "Yes, those eyes. I put up with those eyes for a whole decade of our marriage. I never thought I'd run into you here. Can someone like you, who doesn't have much money, really eat at a fancy place like this? Can you even afford it, or are you here for a once-in-a-lifetime thing?" "It's our wedding anniversary," I replied. "Ah, I see. Poor people can only come to places like this on anniversaries, huh? I come here often, you know. You're still pathetic. Isn't there someone with you?" he asked. "Yeah, there is. I just sent her to pay, you know." "Handling money is a woman's job," Leo said smugly. I thought to myself, he's still the same, always belittling women. Ah, she's back. Just wait. The woman who came back was his lover from 10 years ago. She had aged quite a bit, her beauty half of what it used to be, and she looked worn out from life. I guess Leo has been living it up while his wife suffers. You're still wearing shabby clothes, aren't you? Aren't you embarrassed to dress so poorly? Leo continued, his words making me feel sick. I turned my gaze toward the restroom, hoping my husband would return soon, and there he was. He had been watching us for a while as I was talking to another man. Seeing the confusion on my face, he approached us. "Excuse me, do you need something from my wife?" my husband asked. "Your wife? This woman is your wife?" Leo asked in disbelief. "Yes, what do you need?" my husband responded calmly. "You also look poor." I guess poor women always remarry poor men. Please, don't be rude. My husband is a very respectable man, I replied. Leo snorted in disapproval at my response. You must be just a useless, broke man then, he sneered, glaring at my husband. I thought to myself, this man really hasn't changed at all. Leo was very selfish. Although he worked for a major corporation, it was unclear if he was competent. He was good at sucking up to his boss, though. He blamed his mistakes on his juniors and loudly claimed their achievements were due to his guidance. How he managed to climb the corporate ladder is beyond me, but by the time we divorced, he had become a manager. Leo claimed he was an elite employee, but I never thought of him as elite. I graduated from a prestigious university, Leo would always brag. Not just any university, but a very different kind from the ordinary ones. When I was only dating him, I believed his exaggerated stories and thought he was really smart. But when we got married, I discovered that was his only real talent. He consistently degraded me. Your parents were too poor to send you to university, right? But it's good for you. You didn't have the brains for it anyway. If your family had been rich, you would have had to go to university. But it would have been impossible for someone as stupid as you, he would say. My family wasn't poor. I just wanted to start working sooner rather than going to college, I once tried to explain. Enough with the excuses. You can't handle not making excuses, right? You're an incompetent woman, after all. It's good for women, isn't it? Even if they're incompetent or stupid, as long as they have good looks, they can get by. If they catch a competent man, they can live well, he would retort. I never imagined he would say such things before we married, so his transformation after marriage shocked me. Moreover, his parents weren't wealthy landowners. His father was just a director, yet Leo ruthlessly looked down on anyone he considered poor. You really can't do anything right. You're bad at cooking, you can't clean, and you can't even have kids. Marrying you was a huge mistake, he would say. It wasn't a physical issue that prevented me from having kids, it was the stress caused by Leo. My family has always valued frugality and cherishing what we have, but when I cooked with radish leaves to save money, he yelled, "Are you trying to feed me trash?" and threw them in the trash. It made me realize how fundamentally different we were. One day, he told me he had a lover, a woman much younger than he was. He pushed for a divorce, saying it was better for him to remarry a younger woman. I was happy to divorce such a man. I signed the divorce papers. "Who is this man, Daisy?" my current husband asked. "He's my ex-husband, Leo Thomas," I replied. "Oh, I see," he said. Of course, I had told my husband about everything Leo had said and done to me. It had been a painful 10 years, and I had shared it all with tears. Then, without saying anything, my husband just listened and finally said, "Let's be happy from now on." Leo sneered, "You really dared to marry such a woman like her? Since you're marrying a woman from a poor family, you must be a broke guy too." Well, maybe not. Of course you are. So you're also a broke man, huh? What? Marrying a poor person means you're broke too, am I right? But why did you divorce such a wonderful person? Wonderful? Your eyes must be fooling you. Truly wonderful means having a beautiful wife like mine. He indicated his wife as he pointed at her, who stood there looking embarrassed. Is that woman your wife? My husband asked. Yes, she's beautiful, isn't she? She's actually my boss's daughter. Marrying the boss's daughter definitely helps one climb the career ladder faster. Marrying a broke woman like you probably means you're just a regular employee. Too bad. A regular employee? I haven't heard that word in years, my husband replied calmly. What are you trying to prove? A bottom-tier guy marrying a bottom-tier woman. It just means you'll both be broke for the rest of your lives. And you think you deserve to eat in such a fancy restaurant like this? Well, this level of restaurant isn't a problem for us. Yeah, sure, if that's what you think, Leo sneered. Just then, a waiter passed by, and my husband pulled out a black card, instructing him to settle the bill. Leo, surprised by the black card, tried not to show it but snorted again. Is that a black card? Showing off a card like that here? You're not used to it, are you? You must have borrowed it from someone. Showing off by flashing the card, but later you'll have to pay back the person who lent you that card, right? I can imagine you're scared to splash the cash in such a place. It's all part of your act, huh? Funny thing to say. Who would lend their card, I wonder? No matter how naive someone is, they wouldn't lend their card. How would you know that, Leo? You shouldn't say such insulting things, I interjected. What's insulting? I'm just stating the truth. There's no way you could be wealthy if you married a poor woman like her. My wife is poor, you say? Yes, that's right. Her folks' place is a rundown, one-floor home. You know that, right? Or maybe you were too embarrassed to visit her home, so you went to a family restaurant instead. Meeting her parents at a family restaurant for a marriage proposal is unheard of, but for poor people like you, it's probably the norm. Family restaurant, huh? The fact that you thought of that means you must have done your greeting there, right? If you hadn't experienced it yourself, you wouldn't have thought of it. What are you talking about? I'm not short on money. I wouldn't do such a miserly thing. Yet you came up with it. I never would have thought of that. Right, Daisy? Well, I think I'd like to go to a family restaurant occasionally, but we rarely get the chance, I responded. Exactly. What? You're lying. When you were with me, you were happy to go to family restaurants. That's because I had never really been to one before, I explained. Oh, I bet. You sure talk big. Coming to such a fancy restaurant just makes you want to act all important. Maybe that's you. It seems like you don't fit in this kind of place, Leo sneered. What? You seem out of place, don't you think? I retorted. There's no way I'm out of place. You're the one who doesn't fit in here. Do you even know who I am? Leo challenged. Why would I know you? If you want me to remember you, just become famous, I replied coolly. I am well known, though. Well, it's impossible for a regular employee like you to know me, I guess, Leo scoffed. What? I'm a manager, not a regular employee, he added smugly. Manager? Yes, how about that? Impressive, isn't it? He continued. At that moment, the chauffeur arrived, greeted us politely, and informed my husband, Sir, your car is ready. Thank you, my husband responded. Huh, what's going on? Oh, well, you're probably just the president of some small company. I work for a major corporation, the Holmes Group, and I'm a manager there, Leo boasted. Oh, you're still just a manager? Excuse me, you consider yourself top tier, but staying as a manager at your age won't bring any advancement, my husband replied. What? What? Leo stammered, shocked. This man works at our company? My husband asked. Yes, he's been with our company for a long time, I answered. What? What do you mean, our company? You talk big, but you're just an office lady from a small company, Leo sneered again. That's right. I don't have kids or any reason to quit my job, I replied. So, you can't have kids? I was right. You can't have kids. Something's wrong with you, Leo spat out. Hey, there's a line to how rude you can be. Daisy is perfectly fine. If she's fine, why can't she get pregnant? Women are supposed to have kids, my husband defended me. I don't need to explain that to you. You can't say it because it would prove there's something wrong with her. This man is hopeless, I remarked, frustrated. Yes, so bad it's beyond saving, my husband agreed. This man's name is Leo Thomas, my husband confirmed. Yes, I understand, I replied. He's fired. Daisy, please contact HR, my husband instructed. Okay, I responded. What? What are you saying? Trying to shock me with that? What company's president are you? Do you think you can fool me with such an obvious act? Are you stupid? Leo fumed. Leo, my husband, is the president of the Holmes Group, I stated firmly. What? That can't be, Leo exclaimed. However, the driver, with a look of pity, nodded as he looked at Leo. What? Seriously? Is he really our president? Leo asked, now in disbelief. Yes, and I am his wife and the vice president of our company, I affirmed. What? That's ridiculous. How could Daisy, from a poor family, end up as vice president with just a high school diploma? Leo questioned. Such things don't matter. Whether someone graduated from high school or college doesn't determine their worth, my husband replied calmly. That's ridiculous, Leo muttered, still in shock. I will never forgive anyone who insults my wife, my husband declared. No, there's a union, Leo stammered, grasping for something. Yes, there is a union. The union will protect us employees, he added, trying to defend himself. You're a manager, right? Managers are not union members, so you are not protected by the union. Didn't you know that? My husband asked pointedly. Seriously? Leo stuttered. Well, you better brace yourself. Since you insulted my wife, you must face the consequences, my husband stated firmly. Oh no, Leo whispered, a stunned look on his face. But my husband didn't care and simply asked me if we should go. Then we left the table. That night, perhaps bothered by the afternoon's events, Leo called. His attitude was completely different from his earlier arrogance. Daisy, it's been a while. What do you mean? We already had a talk this afternoon, Leo. Ah, yes. What can I do for you? Your dismissal hasn't been issued yet, right? You guys were just joking, right? Huh? What do you mean about me being the vice president and my husband being the president? No, they're all true. I'm surprised you don't know who your own company's president and vice president are. Why would you be the vice president, though? Because the best way I can help my husband is from the vice president's position. No, but it's strange. Why would a high school graduate be the vice president? It's not strange at all. I only graduated high school because I wanted to start working early, but after we separated, I acquired a college degree. Oh, really? Yes, there are schools you can attend from home, so you really are the president's wife. Yes. How did you manage to marry the president? When did you get married? We got married after I divorced you. I met the president soon after, and we dated for about 2 years before getting married. Married? Why would the president take an interest in someone like you? Stop being so rude. Oh, sorry. Connections are mysterious, aren't they? I just happened to meet the president. Even so, why would he marry someone broke like you? Is he a philanthropist? No one marries for charity. If he's not a philanthropist, did he marry you to make you his slave? It's odd otherwise. Maybe today you got lucky to be taken to a fancy restaurant, but usually you must be having plain, poor meals, right? Living a difficult life where you can't even buy what you like, am I right? Why would you think that? That's not true at all. You're the only one who would do such a thing. There's no way you could marry such a rich man. Why do you think so? Rich people have connections with politicians and other wealthy people. If a poorly raised woman like you shows up at their parties, it would embarrass the president. Or maybe he lets his mistress attend those instead. You're making wild assumptions. If you keep looking down on me like this, you'll truly regret it. I'm just concerned for you. A woman with a poor upbringing like you marrying a rich man like the president will only suffer. A regular employee's husband would suit you better. Marrying someone richer than me, you must be a foolish woman. Who can't see ahead? Who's the fool here? If you called just to say that, I'm hanging up. No, wait, I'm not trying to look down on you. It's just true that you come from poverty that can't be helped. Thinking I'm looking down on you for that is completely wrong. You say I come from a poor family, but my father is wealthy. Your family is poorer than mine. I didn't say it back then because of your pride, but your family home isn't even half the size of mine. Your father is just a department head and you're still just a manager. That's not true. When I proposed to you, you were living in a small single-story house. That was because we were renovating our home then. We had stored all our belongings elsewhere. It was just a temporary residence. No need to move to a big house, my mother said. That can't be true, Leo insisted. You don't have to believe it, but since the renovation is finished, even if you say you want to visit my parents at home, you've stubbornly refused to go again. I couldn't tell you the truth. Who would visit such a poor, run-down house? You really are hopeless. Then I'll send you a picture. This is my family home. The photo I sent was of a large mansion. That's my house. I lived there for a while after our divorce, I continued. What? That can't be true, Leo stammered. It's true. If this is true, then why were you working as an office lady in a small company? If you're so rich, you wouldn't need to work. And if you did work, wouldn't it be at a large corporation? Indeed, my father is the president of a major company. That company was a new one he started. When it was time to decide who would be the president, it was decided that my brother would take the role, so I volunteered to handle the administrative work. Now, that company has advanced to the top of the industry. Is that true? Were you really so rich? Leo asked, bewildered. Yes, this is the truth. This is the real me that you used to look down on. So that's why you could marry the president. That's not it. I met the president because we shared the same hobbies. We met through our hobbies and hit it off. He didn't know I was the daughter of a wealthy family, and I didn't know he was the president. So you are at the company where I work because of that. How long have you been at that company? I joined the company right after our divorce. I had a connection by chance. Why? When you were with me, you were a clerk at your brother's company, and after we divorced, you changed jobs. That's right. My brother's company has grown so much, and he told me it was time to do what I love. So I thought I might as well pursue what I've always wanted to do. Then, just as a senior position became vacant, they headhunted me. But at that stage, I still had no acquaintance with the president. He was still someone high above. I don't understand. How can you have connections like that? So, rich people just connect with other rich people. That's why I'm saying those things don't matter. Why do you think like that? It's because of that mindset that you're still just a manager, I replied. I wonder why your wife hasn't gotten tired of you yet, I remarked. She can't get tired of me. I'm supporting her, Leo replied smugly. Keep it up with that attitude, and you'll get what's coming to you. Anyway, that's the situation, so stop belittling me already, I snapped. I wasn't trying to belittle you. I really thought you were poor, Leo said defensively. About that dismissal you mentioned this afternoon, I began. Oh yes, your dismissal. After all the mocking you did, it's only natural you'd be dismissed, I continued. That would put me in a tough spot. Can you talk to the president so I don't get fired? Leo pleaded. What? You were just mocking me tremendously, and yet you asked not to be dismissed? That's impossible. You know, I have nothing but resentment towards you. Why? The fact that you don't think you're resented is truly astonishing. What have I done to you? Leo asked, bewildered. There's too much to even remember. It's that much. I bet your wife thinks the same as me. Why don't you ask her what she really thinks? Though I doubt she'll tell you, I replied coldly. I only said those things because I thought you were poor. Why do you think I'm mocking you when I'm just being honest? Leo tried to justify himself. Once words are spoken, They can't be taken back, you know. You should understand that as an adult. I do understand that, Leo admitted. Then you should understand why you're being dismissed, right? I pressed. No, I don't understand at all. Please, I'll be in trouble if I'm dismissed. If it were just about this afternoon, the president might have overlooked it, but then you had to call and ask why this and why that. My husband is here now, frowning. He really thinks you're hopeless. Maybe you should just give up. There's no saving you. No, if the president is right there, why can't you just say so? It's only natural for a husband and wife to be together. Besides, you didn't ask if someone was with me, did you? That's true, but you've poured gasoline on your own fire. You mocked not just me, but my parents and my husband too. Look, I didn't think you'd get this angry. Please forgive me. If I had known you were a wealthy lady, I wouldn't have said such mocking things. I won't say them again. Please forgive me. Just give up. I think your dismissal order will come down tomorrow. Wait, please. Leo's voice echoed on the other end of the phone, but I hung up and looked at my husband. The next day, Leo came to the president's office. His face was all white with dark circles under his eyes, and he seemed to be in really bad condition. I was in a meeting with my husband, the president, discussing business matters when I was startled by Leo's appearance. Leo, what's wrong? I asked. I'm very sorry. Leo apologized as he sat down on the spot. Leo, what are you doing? Please, please, just don't fire me, he pleaded. What do you mean? I questioned, confused. Of course, the president knew about yesterday's conversation. He had guessed from my responses during the call, and I had detailed Leo's remarks after hanging up. Therefore, his impression of Leo was very poor, and his anger was even greater than mine. I am truly sorry. Again, I didn't know your wife was from a wealthy family. I think she is a perfect match for the president's wife. I also heard she graduated from university, even if it was through correspondence. She's a hard worker, a far cry from my own wife, Leo admitted. So you decided on her as your wife and then got rid of her, right? The president asked. What? Leo looked up at the president, wondering how he knew such a thing. Of course, I've told my husband everything. We're married, after all. Or do you and your wife not talk about your pasts? I interjected. No, it's not like that, but that was a long time ago. I was young then. I thought Daisy was just a poor man's daughter, so I thought it was okay to have a mistress, Leo confessed. How does it come to that? Is that why you think it's okay to commit sexual harassment or power harassment? The president asked, his tone firm. What do you mean? Don't tell me you haven't done it. There are complaints from your female coworkers. They say if our company doesn't handle it, they'll go to the police. Our company was just discussing what to do about it when your disrespectful remarks came yesterday. It's really hopeless, isn't it? The president continued. That's right. I wouldn't have thought you were actually harassing or bullying, but watching you yesterday, it seemed all too true. You don't even regard women as people, do you? You think they're below you, I added. No, I never. Leo began to protest. Even if that were true, firing me would be too harsh. Please show some mercy. Well, indeed, you have a family. If you were fired, you wouldn't be the only one in trouble, Leo pleaded. That's right, exactly, my husband replied, smirking as he looked at me. So what do you think, Daisy? How about sending Leo to our Ohio branch? Wait, what? The Ohio branch? Leo stammered. Yes, it's in a region with very few people. It's practically unsustainable as a company. The former president, who came from that town, established the branch there to help the local people, but it's a lonely place with just one employee. The previous employee reportedly went mad from the loneliness. We want you to turn that branch around in 3 years. If you can do that, we'll bring you back here. Of course, if you can't, you'll spend your retirement in Ohio, the president explained. Thank you, I appreciate it, Leah replied, reluctantly accepting his fate. Under the guise of the president's mercy, Leo set off for the Ohio branch. but both my husband and I knew it was an impossible task. Having to work tirelessly alone for the small number of town residents, it was obvious that there wouldn't be any profit to be made. Unaware of this, Leo moved to the branch, all motivated. His transfer was with his mistress, who had been his wife, but surely she wouldn't be satisfied with just the cold and nothing else there. Eventually, she reached her limit. His salary plummeted, and despite being the branch manager in name, his pay was minimal, leading his wife to start yelling. This resulted in daily arguments, and although he boasted that if he turned things around in 3 years, he could return to the head office, his city-bred wife couldn't believe his words. She left the divorce papers and went back to the city. Leo tried his best for a year, but no matter how hard he worked, the population wouldn't increase and no profits would come. Eventually, he realized that no amount of effort here would change anything, and one day he submitted his resignation. After leaving the company on his own terms, Leo contacted his wife, but by then she had found someone new. Leo was not only ignored by her, but was beaten up by her new man and ended up in the hospital. After being discharged, Leo looked for a job, but at his age, he found nothing and life became harder for him. He lived in a shabby, run-down apartment, and the only job he could find was as a nighttime store clerk. The man who had once boasted of graduating from a prestigious university now stood alone in a store at night. As for me, I continued to be protected by my kind husband, enjoying another wonderful date this month. Marrying him changed my life so much. I'm grateful that Leo and I divorced.